Some people can miss you deeply and still never type your name into their phone. They can reread your last message, feel a quiet warmth, even imagine what they would say, and then do nothing. From the outside, it looks like indifference. Up close, it's usually a strategy. Sometimes it's even love, translated into silence. If you've ever wondered why someone who seems to genuinely care rarely texts first, you're looking at a small behavior that hides a whole psychological ecosystem. The simplest explanation is the one most people hate. Reaching out first is a bid. It's an exposure. When you text first, you're not just sending words. You're placing a tiny piece of your self-worth into someone else's hands and waiting to see what they do with it. People who rarely text first often have a low tolerance for that kind of waiting, not because they're cold, because their nervous system learned that reaching can be risky. There's a childhood version of this that doesn't get talked about much. Some people grew up in homes where attention was inconsistent. Love was there, but it wasn't reliably responsive. You could be met with warmth one day, annoyance the next, or nothing at all. That trains a very specific skill. You become excellent at reading the room, and you become cautious about initiating. You learn to wait for a signal that it's safe. Texting first to someone like that can feel like walking into a dark room and saying hello and hoping you don't get ignored. So they don't do it. They wait for the knock on the door. For other people, it's not inconsistency, it's criticism. If you were punished for having needs or mocked for being too much, you learn to pre-shrink yourself. You stop giving people reasons to judge you. A first text is a reason. It's a way to be perceived. And if being perceived has historically come with shame, you start treating invisibility as comfort. Even as an adult, with mature relationships and good intentions, the body remembers. There's another layer that looks like confidence, but isn't. Some people rarely text first because they've built their identity around self-sufficiency. They pride themselves on not needing anyone. This can be admirable. It can also be armor. Independence, when it's healthy, is a choice. When it's a defense, it's a rule. Never lean first. Never be the one who wants more. They don't want to feel hungry. They don't want to feel dependent. So they practice a kind of emotional fasting. If you text them, they'll eat. If you don't, they'll tell themselves they weren't hungry anyway. And this is where a lot of misunderstandings are born. The person on the other side interprets silence as low interest. The silent person interprets the absence of a message as evidence that they were right to hold back. Two people, both protecting themselves, both quietly building a story. There's also the social math of power. Texting first can feel like losing a negotiation you didn't agree to be in. Some people learned through past relationships or friendships that whoever cares more gets less. That dynamic shows up in families, in adolescent friend groups, in dating cultures that reward emotional scarcity. If you grew up watching affection become leverage, you don't just learn how to love, you learn how to bargain. And then texting first doesn't feel like connection. It feels like giving up position. They may not even like that they think this way. They might roll their eyes at themselves, but their behavior still follows the rule. Don't show your cards. Another reason is surprisingly unromantic. Some people rarely text first because they have a different default assumption about closeness. If you're someone who grew up in a family where love wasn't expressed through frequent check-ins, you may not associate thinking of you with messaging you. You can feel connected without updates. You can go long stretches without contact and still consider the bond intact. When someone else expects maintenance texts as proof of care, both people are being logical within their own emotional culture. They're just speaking different dialects. Then there's the burden of initiation itself. For many people, texting first isn't one action. It's a chain reaction. If I text, they might reply. Then I have to reply. Then there's a conversation. Then I have to be present, interesting, emotionally calibrated. If you're dealing with anxiety, depression, burnout, or just a chronically overloaded life, initiating contact can feel like opening an app that drains your battery. So they don't start, they respond when they can, because responding has an edge of structure. Initiating is a blank page. Some people also carry a quiet fear of being intrusive. They imagine they're interrupting you, bothering you, pulling you away from real life. That fear doesn't come from nowhere. It often comes from being treated like a nuisance at some point in their development. When you internalize that, you start needing permission to exist in someone's day. Your message becomes a question you're scared to ask. Do I have access to you right now? Waiting for the other person to text first is a way to avoid asking. Because if you text first, you might learn the answer. And sometimes the reason is embarrassingly simple. They've been trained by incentives. If every time they text first, they get slow replies, short answers, or a vibe that feels lukewarm, their brain updates the model, not consciously, quietly. It learns initiation costs more than it pays. That's basic reinforcement learning. People stop doing what doesn't work. But because texting feels personal, we moralize it. We turn a pattern into a judgment about character. We say, they don't care, when sometimes it's, they learn not to reach. And here's the paradox that catches people. Some of the most loyal, emotionally invested people are the least likely to initiate. Because the more they care, the higher the stakes feel. If they text first and you don't respond, it doesn't just sting. It collapses their fantasy that the bond is secure. So they protect the bond by not testing it. It's backwards, but it's common. They'd rather live with uncertainty than risk a clear rejection. The silence becomes a way to keep hope intact. If you're watching this and you're the one who rarely texts first, you might tell yourself you're just not a texter. Maybe that's true, but it's worth noticing what you feel in the moment before you decide not to reach out. Is it calm, like you simply don't think to? Or is there a tiny spike of dread, a flicker of self-consciousness, a calculation about how you'll look? Because that flicker is the real reason. And if you're watching this and you're on the other side, waiting, checking your phone, wondering why you're always the one who starts, the answer isn't always to take it personally. Sometimes it is personal, in the sense that it's about relationship effort. But often it's not personal in the way you think. It's about their history with needing, with being seen, with being the first one to want. A useful way to frame it is this. Some people initiate because connection is their instinct. Other people initiate only when safety is their instinct. They may care just as much. They're just wired to make the world prove itself before they step forward. You can still hold standards. You can still want reciprocity. But you'll make better decisions when you stop confusing silence with emptiness. Because for a lot of people, silence isn't the absence of feeling. It's the presence of fear, pride, exhaustion, or an old lesson that says, if you reach first, you lose. And maybe the quietest tragedy in modern relationships is how often we punish each other for the very defenses we built to survive. We call it coldness. We call it aloofness. Sometimes it's simply a person standing at the edge of the pool, wanting to swim, waiting for a sign that the water won't shock them. If you understand that, you start seeing text differently. Not as proof of love, but as proof of safety. And safety for some people is the hardest message to send.